So this week, Reform announced a policy they probably can't deliver, and the Conservatives announced a policy they probably can, but only one of them made the headlines. Hi, I'm Martin Curtis. This is Change from the Centre. What is it that the Conservatives are doing wrong? So it's worth reminding ourselves about what those two policies were, first of all. The first one was the Reform benefits policy, where they talked about cuts to welfare spending, tougher rules for claimants, restricted access for foreign nationals, and they claimed that it would save about £50 billion a year. The second was the Conservative energy policy, which they announced yesterday, where they talked about prioritising cheaper electricity, more focus on gas, more focus on nuclear, less emphasis on rapid net zero, and a claim saving of about £540 per household per year. Now, my immediate thought when I watched the announcement from Claire Coutinho yesterday was, how do you write a headline from that? Because the policy itself is really disjointed. It's hard to see where the priority was, and it was hard to see where you were going to get a sentence from it that an editor was going to be able to stick at the top of his newspaper, or as a headline in Sky News. Whereas the Reform policy, it was really easy. Reform proposed £50 billion cuts to welfare spending. And I wouldn't advise or support anybody just writing a policy so it can have a snappy headline. But I would say that you need to be able to deliver something that gets a message across very quickly so it keeps people's attention. And the Conservatives, in terms of clarity around that, really failed. So I'm going to do a deeper analysis of this issue in a minute. But before I do, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the Conservatives are losing a march on reform in terms of the cut through for their policy at the moment? If you do, leave a comment. It'd be great to hear what you think. Let me know why. Fantastic. But also, please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps me to grow the channel, but it will also mean you're notified when more videos come up. So if you could do that, it'd be great. So one of the things we don't have to do is question whether the Reform policy is radical enough. Anything that proposes to take £50 billion out of the welfare budget is radical. My problem with it, as somebody that supports a radical centre, is that it is right out of the right-wing playbook. That in itself isn't a bad thing, but I also don't think it's deliverable. But the Conservatives, however, have a policy that definitely is not radical enough. And that's part of the reason why it hasn't made the headlines. So, for an example, they talk within their policy about climate change, recognise climate change as a thing, and challenge the fact that Reform as a party are climate change deniers. But then they say we're not going to deliver net zero. We're going to be 80% clean by 2050. That's winding back on ambition. It's winding back on radicalism. We live in a world where technology is getting better and better by the month, by the day, almost by the hour. And yet the Conservatives are pushing all that away and saying we'll only be 80% there. And there's another thing. They are talking about £540 per household savings on energy costs in that period as well. But that's only part of the increase that we've had over the last 10 years. Our energy costs, for various reasons, such as the Gulf War, the war in Ukraine, have gone up and up and up and up. And the Conservatives are saying we'll recover part of that. but you'll still be worse off as far as energy costs are concerned. And I question how they think that anybody's going to look at that and say, here's something we can sign up to, and we can really, really stand on a doorstep and say, look at how exciting this is. I think in terms of radicalism and in terms of ambition, they've really, really missed out. But there's another reason why the Conservatives are failing to get cut through. If you look at Reform UK's front bench, they've got Farage, they've got Tice, they've got Anderson, they've got Youssef, they've got Jenrick, all people that are instantly recognisable. With the Conservatives, apart from Kemi Badenoch, who is there? Now, yesterday's announcement was done by Claire Coutinho, and I think she's very good, but she's not a recognisable face. So where people are seeing their policy announcement on the news media, they're seeing somebody and thinking, who's she? This can't be very important. This is a big issue for the Conservatives. It's not necessarily a problem traditionally. You can think of the Labour Party before they came to power. Everybody knew Keir Starmer, but very few others. But the Conservatives' fight is not with the Labour Party. The Conservatives have chosen to put their fight up against reform. And so they've got to be different, and they've got to make more of their people just as recognisable as the Farages and the Jenricks of Reform UK. Deliverability is the one area where the Conservatives come out ahead in this sort of little comparison that I've been doing. I don't think the reform policy on benefits is deliverable for two main reasons. The first one is the people it will most harm live in the constituencies they will want to represent if they become the party of government. But the second one is the utter misery and deprivation that it will cause, including homelessness, I don't think is acceptable to the British people. However, it is a policy that really, really appeals to a lot of their core activists. And that's pretty much one of the things that Farage has to do at the moment, is keep his party on board. The Conservative Party policy is deliverable, but it is only deliverable because it lacks ambition and it lacks any real drive and vision. And so I don't think it will ever have cut through. So one of the things you may know about me is that I am a past Conservative Party member, and I left the Conservative Party because they were doing this drift to the right and basically chasing reform and chasing reform. Now, if the Conservative Party want to continue to do that, they've got to get better. They have got to recognise that they are losing. But I would argue the best option for them is to move back to where they traditionally have been, where they've had a good solid sprinkling of centre ground policies and a good solid sprinkling of right of centre policies. And go back to this thing about being a broad church that they're getting rid of. My fear is that if they stay where they are, the Conservative Party will disappear. And that would be a shame, because the Conservative Party have got centuries of success in British politics. But past success is not a guarantee of a future.